The sun is shining brightly through the tall windows of the court, radiating across the wooden benches to produce long shadows on the tense faces packed within. There is a hum of nervous activity, the scent of coffee mixed with the sharp hint of pen scratching on paper. Every action, every muffled word is magnified within the silent hall. Today is more than the usual court appearance, and it is the day that long repressed revelations may erupt into the light. It all revolves around Kody, his shoulders fixed in a rigid stance. His jaw locked, he attempts to look nonchalant, but the tiny tremble in his hands and the way his eyes flicker to Meri reveal the turmoil he feels. He's trying to mask. Across the room, Meri sits gripping a folder to her chest. It's no mere paperwork she holds. This is the result of years of doubt, unanswered questions, and secret betrayals. The pressure of its contents causes her hands to tremble, but she takes control of herself by forcing a slow and measured breath. It's her turn, and she is about to turn the world upside down. Christine is watching intently, her eyes raking across Kody's face, analyzing every subtle expression, every gesture. Janelle is a storm in waiting, sitting calmly beside Christine, saying nothing, yet conveying volumes with her fingers drumming nervously on her leg, the biting of her lip, the tracking of every movement in the room with her eyes. Robyn is sitting a few benches away, looking serene, yet her jaw is clenched tightly, and her feet are tapping anxiously. No one in the room is oblivious to the consequences of this meeting. The air is thick with anticipation, electric with the promise of the storm that is about to break. The judge enters, the sound of his robes rushing against the floor suddenly audible amid the silence in the courtroom. Lively conversations cease at once, and not a sound is heard, not even the mumbling of the court clerk. He finds his place at the bench, his presence radiating the weight of his authority. The very air seems to contract with his presence, and the focus is solely on Kody, Meri, and the evidence that might bring down this entire family. Meri stands up, her voice slicing through the quiet like a scalpel. "Your Honor, I have evidence that bears directly upon this case," she continues, holding herself with all the others' eyes fixed upon her. A sense of anticipation, terror, and incredulity sweeps the crowd. The judge leans forward, raising an eyebrow. "Proceed, Ms. Meri," he prompts. It is simple and to the point, and the full import of this settles like a chill upon the spines of all who are present. Slowly, Meri slides the manila folder across the table. Cameras snap, capturing each movement, each hint of facial reaction. Kody's fists clenched beneath the table demonstrate the reaction of his physical body to the coming storm of revelations contained within the manila folder. One that contains DNA test evidence, proof of the very suspicions that had developed for so long, of the very lies that had been so carefully constructed for so defenseless a period of time. Christine's face has set into a mask of knowing grin, of confirmation, of validation at last for the suspicions she had entertained for so very long. The judge takes the file, his eyes quickly scanning through its contents. The sounds of the papers rustling are like a cacophony to the silence. This means a lot. The judge mumbles, more to himself. All eyes are fixed on the table. All ears are listening to the muffled sounds of the voice of the judge. Kody swallows his saliva hard, his heart beating fast, and his intuition telling him that the elusive thread of truth has drawn near. Meri's eyes sweep the courtroom, steady and unblinking. "I simply want the truth to be told," she says, her voice gentle but with a strength that is unshakable. "For the sake of the truth, for the sake of the children, and for the justice this family is owed." The ringing sound of her words resonates through the air, unshakable, unturnable away. Nobody blinks. Christine leans slightly in her chair, a glance passing between her and Janelle. Robyn takes a sharp breath through her nose. The air grows even thicker, like a storm cloud about to break under their collective weight. The courtroom is a pressure cooker, electricity in the air as all these people wait together with bated breath. The judge leans back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the manila folder as he ponders the documents before him. "These findings are unexpected," he drawls, each word carefully enunciated. "We will be cautious, but let me be very clear, the implications of this are monumental." A silence descends over the room as this sinks in with each and every person in the room, a weight bearing down across each of their heads, unignorable. Kody shifts uncomfortably in his seat, a flicker of terror flashing across his lips. This can't be happening," he whispers, the words being smothered by the heavy silence. Christine's lips curve into a faint smile, tinged with a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Janelle is sitting erect, her body tight with control on the surface, but her entire being primed for the explosion about to erupt. Robyn's gaze flickers towards Meri, the corners of her eyes shining wet with repressed tears. The court clerk calls the first witness, and the attention of the room returns to the hearing. It is a family friend who testifies to moments of quiet observation, moments that seemed trivial at the time, but take on explosive meaning now. Each trivial detail throws more gasoline on the growing fire, painting a picture that slowly contradicts the image Kody has worked so hard to create. Whispers begin in the crowd, as the stunned audience begins to understand the implications of the revelations being unveiled. Meri speaks of moments of doubt, winning consistencies gnawed inside her, when whispers of secrets dare not remain hidden. Occasionally, her voice cracks, but her conviction is unshakable. I began to see things that just did not add up, she reveals, her voice threatening to break as she holds back her tears. The very air is thick with tension, with each person in the room holding their collective breath as the truth peeks out into the light. The color drains from Kody's face. As the meaning of Meri's testimony sinks in, the judge is watching him, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Mr. Brown, you will get the opportunity to respond," he continues, his voice low and measured. "But you must understand, what has been given is compelling evidence and will not be lightly dismissed." These words are like a blow to Kody. The weight of the courtroom crashing around him from every angle. Christine sits back in her chair, her eyes locked intently on Kody. There is a soft and perfect satisfaction in them, a kind of vindication, which is the result of all those years of suspicion proving correct. Janelle fidgets in her chair, desperately fighting to compose herself, while Robyn's face is a mixture of fear and defiance. Not one of them is left untouched by the currents of electricity in the air. The first DNA evidence comes into the light, carefully exposed for all to see. Whispered rumors turn into audible gasps. The room pulsates electric shock and skepticism. Kody's hands are shaking beneath the table, his undoubtedly well-rehearsed composure faltering. Meri's eyes are hard and hot, burning with the fire of one who has spent years forging the chance she now holds. Christine's smile spreads, almost imperceptible but obvious nonetheless. Janelle's fingers are tapping out their rapid staccato on the tabletop, revealing the turmoil she strives so valiantly to suppress. Robyn takes one sharp breath, her racing heart almost audible as the force of the evidence presses down upon her. The judge surveys the jury, taking in every reaction, every flash of emotions. "We will take a brief recess before continuing the proceedings," he declares. But this case is far from over as the women move from under the judicial spotlight. Murmurs are subdued but insistent, glances are exchanged quickly, whispers are shared, and calculations are carried out in silence. Kody stands in a corner, holding onto the edge of a chair, trying to compose himself. Christine catches a knowing look from Janelle, all in silent recognition that a storm has just been ignited. Robyn stands a little apart, her back hunched and her mind trying to cope under mounting pressures. "Meri?" She even stays calm as her heart thrums fast in her breast, because she understands that what has just been started has far from ended in her quest for truth. Even for those not in the courtroom, the tension is palpable. Cameras angle for shots, onlookers linger, and the heaviness of what is to come is pressing down on every person inside the building. Secrets, long hidden and carefully entombed, are beginning to claw their way into the sunlight, and as the next chapter of the trial draws near, it becomes impossible to say what the revelations may hold or whom the fallout may leave standing. When the dust finally dies down, the trial resumes and Kody finds that the atmosphere is different this time around. Though it may not sound possible, the tension is thick. Everyone around seems to have a burden, an unspoken awareness that the events about to transpire might change lives in an irreversible way. The judge returns. The sound of his robes rustling as he sits is magnified, and the squeak of the chair serves as a commentary on the silence filling the room. Kody sits with his hands clenched tightly before him, his knuckles white, as he looks over at Meri, who maintains her composed demeanor but whose inner turmoil is palpable today, because today, there are no secrets. Meri stands again, the folder in her hand, a concrete representation of truth and deceit. The sound of her voice, though soft, slices through the heavy silence in the room like a knife. "The contents of these documents have been haunting me for years," she begins, direct and accusatory, her eyes meeting Kody's. The room seems to hold its collective breath, as if the very walls are leaning in to pick up the truth she's about to spill. Christine moves subtly in her chair, the barest flicker of a smile dancing on her lips in the form of silent recognition of being righted. Janelle's hands, though calm and still, clench in agitation on her knee, this nervous tension at odds with her calm demeanor. Robyn, in the crowd somewhere several rows away, swallows hard, the tight control she keeps on her emotions faltering for just a moment in her eyes. The judge leans forward, scrutinizing the documents. Meri shows him with great care the results. He sees before him are lab results, notes, and letters. Every one of them has an import that no one can deny. "These results, they mean a great deal," he says to himself. The courtroom holds its collective breath as if it is paused within time itself, as if every pulse sounds loudly like thunder. Kody shifts uncomfortably within his seat as a droplet of sweat trickles down his temple. Today had loomed as a fear within his mind. But to live it was to experience a pressure that is indescribably crushing. Meri lays out the first DNA result on the table, pushing it towards the judge. This contains official stamps and official signatures, and even has the seal of the laboratory, the only concrete and absolute proof that has long been suspected. Flashing cameras light up the scene, capturing each and every moment on their lenses. Kody's face hardens and his fists clench underneath the table. Christine doubles up, her eyes squinting, the pleasure of vindication being barely contained. Janelle takes a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Kody and the judge, mentally preparing herself for the tempest that will soon break out. Robyn breathes out, her hands trembling with panic. Meri's voice escalates, demanding everyone's attention. Your Honor, this evidence proves a truth which cannot be denied. The paternity of one of Kody's children, long in question, has now been scientifically proved. The courtroom erupts in shocked gasps which echo through the high ceilings. Camera shutters fasten furiously, freezing Kody's shocked and disbelieving expression forever. The judge looks up, with a serious expression and a grave look in his eyes. This is extraordinary, he declares, with all the weight of the unbelievable truth. Kody jumps up, his voice shaking, but he struggles to conceal it behind a mask of anger and indignation. This is absurd, he cries, but he clearly has no conviction in what he says. And even Kody's colleagues and lawyers exchange a telling glance, knowing as they do that this evidence cannot be denied. A sneering smile creeps across Christine's lips, one of triumph and eager anticipation. Janelle readies herself for battle, stiffening her body for what must be expected to follow. Before Kody and her husband erupt into blows of anger and recrimination so surely anticipated, Robyn pushes forward in her seat, her lip bitten between her teeth, struggling even now to retain her composure under what appears to be rapidly shrinking room conditions. The judge gestures to restore calm, his gavel not needing to fall before the courtroom falls quiet. Order in the court, he declares with conviction. We will proceed with additional testimony. The implications of these findings are staggering, and all of us in the courtroom will conduct ourselves with decorum. The words linger in the atmosphere, their gravity pressing heavily against all the listeners. Meri presses on, speaking of quiet observation, of moments when she had picked up on inconsistencies others had brushed aside as trifles. There were nights when I stayed up wondering why certain things did not add up, she whispers, her voice trembling ever so slightly with emotion. Small inconsistencies, little white lies. It painted a picture I couldn't ignore. The courtroom falls silent as Meri's words hang in the air, and even the audience is forced to lean forward in rapt attention. Christine shifts uncomfortably in her chair seat, a small, self-satisfied smile on her lips. She has always questioned Kody's honesty, and now she is proving herself right before her eyes. Janelle's hands are clasped together, white-knuckled as she prepares for the emotional fallout that is occurring before her eyes. Tears are glistening on the edges of Robyn's eyes, threatening to shatter the icy control she is so carefully maintaining. The next witness, the judge calls out, and Kody reluctantly calls the name of his family friend who has witnessed the family dynamics for so many years. The family friend describes instances that are almost imperceptible but speak of the deceits and secrets practiced for so many years. Kody squirms uncomfortably, realizing the web of deceit is unraveling before him much faster than he could ever have hoped. Meri hands the judge a set of letters, handwritten communications between family members, offering versions of the truth at odds with previous testimonies. The judge reads them carefully, raising an eyebrow in incredulity from time to time. This throws an entire different light on the situation, he says in amazement, scowling at Kody, who turns crimson with rage and embarrassment. Christine nods in satisfaction. Janelle observes the scene carefully, calculating every note of the drama, and Robyn bites the inside of her cheek as she tries not to react involuntarily. The courtroom is electric, every noise amplified in the silence. Even the faint rustle of papers or the scrape of shoes on the floor is blown out of proportion, a symbol of the thin line of decorum that is maintained. Meri begins to relate how these last few years have made her feel doubts, irritations, and pain that have been festering just below the surface. Her voice is steady but laden with feelings. I needed to know the truth, she admits. Not for revenge, not to embarrass Dot, but for clarity and for the children who deserve the truth. Kody shifts in his seat, leaning forward, the hint of desperation in his gaze. This isn't the way it's supposed to happen, he whispers, as if in anticipation of consolation, but there isn't any to be had. The reality, laid bare by Meri, is merciless, unforgiving, and inescapable. Christine leans back in her seat, basking in the moment with an air of quiet satisfaction. while Janelle remains silently pensive, absorbing each nugget of information with measured control. Robyn's hands are tightly clenched in her lap, her face as white as porcelain, her wide, frightened eyes flicking from Kody to the judge. The judge takes a deep breath. The gravity of the situation is obvious from the way he sets his shoulders. We will move on with the next lot of testimony. All of us need to remember that honesty and transparency are the order of the day. The evidence already gathered is very telling. Further knowledge is required so that clarity might be achieved. The room holds a silence heavy with the meaning of the statement. Meri's next exposure is a subtle but crushing blow. She tells of conversations overheard, passing comments tossed off in the moment. Small disclosures that, pieced together, reveal an incontestable truth. Each word she utters ramps up the tension, each pause a beat in a drumroll of suspense. Kody's eyes go wide, his face going white as a sheet. A hardness enters Christine's face. A flash of triumph lights her eyes. Her mouth turns into a stiff line as she holds back her feelings. Robyn's breathing shallows as her panic escalates. As this first round of thrilling exposure draws near its end, only a temporary storm break precedes an even stormier finish. The judge calls a short recess in proceedings, and only a short moment passes before all implications are fully absorbed. Then the judge takes a seat again as Kody paces in a far corner, racing his mind in hopes of guessing what's next. And Meri stands ready, her heart racing with anticipation that comes from knowing that even as this first truth comes forth, far worse revelations lurk in wait. But outside the spotlight of the court, the whispers and the looks suggest a realization the family dynamics, skillfully handled all these years, are now being drawn into the bright light of observation. Secrets long buried are now out, and the effect is such that each and every person present knows that the testimony to be presented next is going to be even more devastating. The court resumes after the second recess. However, the atmosphere has become even thick, bordering on suffocating. This no longer warrants description as a courtroom. It's now a battleground in which every utterance and every look qualifies as a war strategy that encompasses secrets kept for far too long and truths that are long due. Kody opens his defense at the middle of this battleground with hands clasped together and a clenched jaw that accentuates his nervous looks directed towards Meri. Meri gets up once more, with her head held high in a confident stride despite the turmoil within. She speaks in tranquil yet stern tones, with the swiftness of a scalpel to mow down the silence. Your Honor, I have more evidence to share, she says. The judge nods for her to continue. The court is on the edge of its seat, knowing that the next piece of information might break the delicate balance. Christine's eyes are like the sharp claws of a predator watching Kody. Janelle's face is expressionless, but the stiffness in her shoulders reveals the turmoil brewing inside. Robyn, sitting in the background, shifts uncomfortably, with her hands tightly clutched to the point that her knuckles have turned white. The first witness is a family confidant who has bore witness to the majority of the situations hidden behind the veil. The friend's vocal delivery is a bit shaky while they share moments hidden away from the prying public eye. Every single thing they say is the smallest thing, but they tell their story so well, and the picture they create is inescapable. Kody's hands shake beneath the tabletop, and even his lawyer looks on nervously. Christine is leaning forward, a look of pleased satisfaction upon her face. Then too is a pale, tightening-lipped Janelle. Robyn is biting her lip, a look of pure terror on her face. Meri listens rapt, nodding occasionally, her eyes never leaving Kody. The significance of the moment weighs down on her, but she feels a sense of purpose she has not felt in years. This, she knows, is bigger than any sort of vindication she might personally get. It's the discovery of truth, justice, and the lies that have followed them all down into the trenches for far too long. The judge peers at the witness, turning pages from the documents Meri had given him before the trial began. These points are taken, he says finally. Please, do go on. The witness begins to detail the ways in which she believes the truth came out. The whispers in the empty rooms, the casual remarks that were never meant for public consumption, the inconsistencies and emotions that now retroactively express something far more sinister on the page. Kody shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his face chalk white, his eyes racing back and forth as the carefully constructed facades of all his possible tales threaten to come crumbling down around him. There is the slightest, most controlled smile from Christine, yet satisfaction tempered by restraint. Janelle's fingers are drumming on her knee, the hands of Robyn are fidgeting in her lap, as her eyes dart back and forth from Meri to Kody to the judge. The courtroom is alive and pulsing, each sound and movement contributing to the atmosphere. Meri continues her resurrection by unearthing a set of letters she has in court. These are personal communications between family members that are contradictory to other assertions that have been made. Every letter is explicitly displayed with each word pronounced clearly in court. The results are instantaneous. There are gasps emanating from the audience. While Kody's composure is visibly shaken, his hands are trembling with his lips pressed together. Leaning backward in his chair, the judge scrutinizes the letters, his brow furrowed, his fingers drumming against the table. These message transmissions, they imply a conscious withholding of the truth, he whispers. We have to be careful, yet the implications are obvious. The room breathes out collectively. Yet the tension doesn't relax. Meri's voice becomes stronger, filling with the weight of authority. I offer this evidence not to shame anyone, she says, but to show the truth. For the sake of truth, she repeats. For the sake of the children, and to assure that justice is done. Meri's words ring in the air like a benediction. Christine's eyes light up with pleasure, while hers are taut with tension. Robyn's fists clench and unclench in her lap as she struggles to contain her internal turmoil. I'll believe it when I see it, she says to herself. I'll believe it when I see it. The next witness brings an emotional shock, a member of the family, who has been very quiet up until this point. These witnesses speak with shaking voices about their own experiences, which contradict Kody's reports. The courtroom is silent, with the weight of each statement, which seems to ring out with the resonance of a hammer against the high ceilings. Kody shifts uncomfortably, his eyes wide with fear. As his face twists momentarily with fear, Christine's mouth is set in a line, her happiness barely contained. Janelle's hands are clenched, and she's clearly preparing herself for the next piece, while Robyn's hands are shaking slightly, this effort being the minimum level required for her to keep her emotional control. Meri continues her report, walking the DNA evidence step by step. These results confirm some ideas that have lingered in the shadows for several years, exposing truths that couldn't be denied. Judge William Jenkins is scanning every piece of the evidence, nodding his head at points, his eyes darting briefly at Kody with an intensity that speaks volumes. These results are not merely compelling, Judge William Jenkins declares, his voice measured and strong. Future witnesses will have the task of interpreting them fully. The air is thick with tension. Kody's hands are trembling beneath the table, his control slipping. He leans and whispers to his lawyer, his words muffled and inconsequential in the heavy silence. Christine is radiating triumph and excitement. Janelle is frozen in place, taking it all in, while Robyn is squirming uncomfortably in her chair, her skin white and her eyes darting about in distress. Meri describes instances of personal observation where she picked out discrepancies that others chose to ignore. So I started to notice little things that just didn't add up, she says gently, her voice trembling but firm, things that seemed insignificant, but looking back added up to a pattern I couldn't ignore. The courtroom seems to be holding its collective breath, the silence so palpable that it seems alive with anticipation. The judge calls for a temporary recess, allowing the magnitude of the revelations to sink in. The audience is abuzz with hushed whispers and nervous glances. Kody withdraws to the corner, clutching the edge of the bench for support. Fighting to compose himself, a look is exchanged between the sisters. With each aware that the tempest is far from over, Robyn sits back in her chair, her eyes wide with shock, striving to conceal the turmoil raging inside. Meri stands erect, her heart pounding with the realization that the worst is yet to come. As the recess comes to a close and the court reconvenes, Meri introduces her final witness for this round, an individual with a keen understanding of the dynamic that has been occurring within the family for years. The witness's account is poignant, painting a vivid picture with its moments of quiet despair and hidden strife. Each word hangs heavy, like a rock cast into a tranquil pond, creating ripples throughout the courtroom. Kody's pallor turns from pale to clammy as the sweat breaking out along his hairline, while the tension between the two women on the stand is palpable. Kody and the judge are also aware that they themselves are on the witness stand, with every aspect of their lives on public display and the endgame clearly in sight. Courtroom tension is palpable as the judge scrutinizes the witness with great interest, his eyes narrowing minutely as he processes the evidence now coming to light. Your evidence has been heard, the judge states, his expression unreadable. It too shall be considered, along with the evidence already placed before the court. The truth has always been there, right before our eyes. Meri concludes with a voice loud and clear in the silence. It is not merely a question of secrets or deceit, but rather a question of understanding, accountability, and consequences. She looks around the room with a fleeting glimpse at several of the main players. Kody, Christine, Janelle, and Robyn meet her gaze momentarily. Before the weight of reality can sink in, Kody breathes raggedly, trying to compose himself. But the end result is already evident. The seeds of self-doubt, embarrassment, and fear have been planted, and the courses are already irreversible. Christine leans back in her seat, her eyes gleaming with a level of satisfaction Janelle breathes in deeply, trying to retain her fragile control while Robyn holds onto her hands, her knuckles white from her tight grip. The courtroom is electric with a heavy anticipation that swings wide on the fourth day. Everyone in the room feels the heaviness of the day bearing down upon them, a heaviness that can shake even the bravest man. Kody is fixed in the middle like a statue, gritting his teeth and glancing nervously towards Meri. His weight has begun to crack, worn away by the evidence, the witness accounts, the DNA test. Meri straightens up, her commanding presence impossible to overlook, her hands clasping the folder containing the revelations that lie ahead. She speaks with a calm voice, with a hint of steel that slices through the tension-filled silence of the courtroom. Your Honor, the next witnessing will reveal the truth that has long remained concealed. She begins, her eyes fixed intently on Kody. The judge gives her a nod, his expression grave, prompting her to continue. The audience leans in, the anticipation of a breaking point getting the better of them. Christine's eyes shine with quiet satisfaction, her lips tight-lipped with a controlled smile. Janelle's hands are shaking as she tries to hold them together, her composure slipping through her fingers. Robyn, seated several benches ahead, lets out a harsh breath as her calm exterior splits with nervous fingers dancing in her lap. The air seems electric, heavy with anticipation, as if the walls were holding their collective breaths. The first witness of the hearing is a family confidant who has known the family a long time and has picked up the subtle nuances of the family dynamics. This testimony has a lot of emotional weight, with descriptions of tensions and quiet arguments and hints of deceit that Kody had thought were not apparent to anyone else. Kody shifts uncomfortably in his chair, his hands curling over the edge of the table. Christine leans slightly forward, her eyes narrowing. Janelle keeps quiet, taking all the emotional punch. Robyn bites her lip, her hands clenching. Meri offers the witness a series of letters and messages, each one carefully constructed to show the contradictory communications. She speaks each word clearly, letting the courtroom absorb the magnitude of the evidence. Gasps fill the room. Kody's face goes white, a flash of panic crossing his eyes. Christine's smile widens, controlled but evident. Janelle takes a slow breath, fighting to compose herself, while Robyn sits back, eyes wide, trying to keep her grip on control. The judge flips through the evidence, sometimes stopping to study the handwriting, the timestamps, the subtle details that make the evidence impossible to deny. The pattern is clear, he says, almost to himself. These communications point to intentional deception of the truth. The court is silent. Every onlooker in the room is struck by the implication of the statement, the recognition of the understanding that the ground of trust has been disturbed to its roots. Kody slowly gets up as he struggles to take control of the situation once again. This is taken out of context, he says as his voice trembles despite his resolve to sound firm. The judge's steady gaze is unblinking as he says, Mr. Brown, all evidence will be taken together. No attempts to spite it will be tolerated. The air in the courtroom seems to thicken as Kody slowly slumps down on his chair once again. Meri emerges, sharing her revelations of personal enlightenment which have tortured her for years. I saw the inconsistencies, she whispers, her eyes welling up with tears. Little white lies, little manipulations, and they added up, and I knew, deep down, that the truth had to come out. Her voice echoes through the room, laced with years of emotional pain and investment. Christine's eyes shine with inner triumph. Janelle's hands tremble slightly in her lap, and Robyn's face struggles to retain its composure. Another witness is called, a relative who had thus far kept quiet, an observer whose insight carries the passionate involvement that the trial room has so far missed. Their words are laced with tears as they speak of painful and terrible experiences, all of which are hidden actions and deception. Every word stings Kody like a blow from an anvil as he continues to lose control of himself. Christine delights in the reaction, leaning well forward now. Janelle bites back her own feelings, pressing her lips tight together while Robyn squirms uncomfortably. Meri carefully lays out the final piece of evidence, another set of DNA analysis that reveals the true suspicions and past allegations Kody made were false all along. These analyses only confirm what we all know, the judge says officially, but the full implications will only be discerned later when the full testimony comes out. Time hangs in the balance, weighing upon the collective chest of the room as Kody's hands shake beneath the table. A smile creeps onto Christine's lips as she leans back in her seat now, hands clasped together and eyes wide with glee. Janelle takes a deep breath in anticipation of what she knows will come next. Preparing for the torrent of emotions that are sure to overwhelm her, Meri shares personal events, moments of great emotion hidden away for so many years. Some nights I couldn't sleep, and there were times when I saw that a foundation of deceit had been built on the truth for many years. Then I knew that I couldn't be quiet about this anymore. Meri's words have a resonant quality, filled with the suppressed feelings of so many years. Christine encourages her with a faint nod and a small smile of pleasure, while Janelle's face is set in a frozen mask of restraint. Robyn bites her lip, glancing nervously at Kody, trying to guess what his reaction will be. The judge asks for a brief recess so that the emotional intensity of the meeting can sink in on all of them. Affiliates in attendance whisper amongst themselves, looking shocked or fascinated respectively, while Kody paces in the corner of the room, his mind racing as droplets of his sweat appear on his forehead. Christine and Janelle share an unsurprised look, knowing that things are only about to get more intense for all of them, while Robyn's fists are locked together tightly, with Meri's heart pounding in anticipation of the even more shocking levels of testimony that lie ahead. As the proceedings continue, Meri calls her last witness for the day. It is a person who has been observing the family dynamics with a keen eye for several years. It is apparent from their testimony that they have first-hand knowledge of each member's manipulative activities. It is a testimony that is raw, emotional, and filled with instances of muffled manipulations, hidden meetings, and unspoken betrayals. It is a testimony that is laced with drama, and each word is like a thunderclap. In the courtroom, Kody looks pale, his composed demeanor shattered. Christine is leaning forward, a look of satisfaction on her face. Janelle is clenching her hands together, bracing for the shock. Robyn is biting the inside of her cheek, trying hard to suppress her tears. The judge listens intently, a serious expression on his face, his head nodding occasionally. Your testimony has been recorded. It will be considered carefully. So far, the evidence presented. It is a turning point in the case. The courtroom erupts in a collective response, the tension building to a point. Kody is leaning back, his hands clutching the edge of the chair, his mind racing with the anticipation for the bombshell yet to be disclosed. Christine and Janelle share a subtle nod, aware of the turning point in the hearing, while Robyn is tense, her eyes widened in disbelievement. Meri's concluding comments for the session are measured yet very powerful. The truth can no longer be hidden, she declares, her voice crisp and strong. The time for accountability, for clarity, and for the power of honesty to assert itself has arrived. The choices we face today will determine the future for this family for eternity. Kody takes a shaky breath as his face turns white and droplets of sweat begin to appear on his brow. Christine leans back in her seat looking satisfied. Janelle sits in stunned silence as she takes in the reality of what's happening in this moment. Her hands tightly clasped together as her eyes move back and forth between Meri, her husband Kody, and the judge who presides over this momentous event that will change their lives forever. The courtroom reconvenes for the fifth session, and the atmosphere is electric, tense, charged, almost insupportable. The earlier revelations have set the stage for a confrontation that no one could have foreseen. All in the room can feel it, the weight of truth pressing down, the storm about to break. Kody sits stiffly, his face tightly clenched, his eyes darting anxiously toward Meri. His facade of composure is breaking down, not by the earlier testimonies and DNA evidence he has maintained for years. Meri stands up and calmly, yet firmly, proceeds to where she has kept the final pieces of evidence in a folder. Her voice never shakes, but in a quiet intensity, it cuts the oppressing silence. Your Honor, the evidence I am about to present cannot be ignored, she says to the judge, her gaze steady, now fixed on Kody. The judge nods, signaling her to proceed, and the room leans forward as one, knowing intuitively that this is going to be the crescendo of the fight in this courtroom. Christine's eyes are beaming with satisfaction, her lips curled into a thin smile of quiet triumph. Janelle sits stiffly upright, her hands clasped tightly over one another in her lap, bracing herself for the emotional storm. On Robyn's face, composure breaks for a second as she sharply exhales, fingers fidgeting nervously. The star first witness of the session is an insider to the family, a person right at the center of the personal machinations within the family. Heavy, emotionally charged, it recounts instances of secrecy, whispered arguments, manipulations, all matters Kody hoped would never see the light of day or be heard in a court of law. Words fall like sledgehammers, one after another, reverberating around the hall, with each sentence hitting the fragile walls of deception Kody has set up. Kody sifts with unease and tries to mask growing panic. Christine leans forward, contentedly, absorbing every nuance. Janelle exhales softly, her knuckles white. Robyn fidgets in her seat, pale-faced and bug-eyed. Meri proceeds to hand him a succession of documents, letters, messages, and notes showcasing conversations and contradictions buried. She reads them out loud to the courtroom, the weight of every word sinking in. Gasps ring out from the crowd. Kody's face whitens, his eyes wide, his hands trembling for a second as he pulls backward into his chair. Christine's subtle smile spreads wider, hardly contained. Janelle shuts her eyes for a millisecond, seeming to take a calming breath, while Robyn's fingers work nervously in her lap as the anxiety inside her begins to build. The judge examines the documents, his eyes narrowing as he looks at the handwriting. Timestamps and official seals, the evidence is quite compelling, he says, his voice firm. Measured. Subsequent testimony will elucidate the context. But the insinuation cannot be denied. The courtroom seems to hold its collective breath. Kody shifts uncomfortably in his seat, the shaking of his hands betraying his rising fear and desperation. Christine leaned back incrementally, her eyes sparkling with quiet triumph. Janelle's hands stayed tightly clasped, anchoring herself tensely through the storm. As Robyn's jaw clenched, bracing for the next wave of revelations, Meri describes her personal experiences, emotional moments of betrayal, inconsistencies she had noticed over the years, and the quiet despair that had built inside her. I stayed awake at night, piecing together small lies and contradictions, she says. Her trembling voice barely above a whisper, I knew that the truth had to come out. No matter the cost. The room is dead silent but for the sound of her composing her breath. Christine nods subtly, a quiet acknowledgement of validation. Janelle's hands are gripping tightly into her lap, trying to compose herself, while Robyn twirls her fingers anxiously, eyes darting to Kody in silent fear. The next witness had been a family aide and thus privy to the dynamics behind the closed doors. The testimony is hot and emotional. Private moments are exposed that show patterns of manipulation and secrecy. Every sentence falls like a sledgehammer. Kody's face whitens even more, sweat beginning to bead up along his temple. Christine leans forward slightly, her eyes gleaming at the unfolding drama. Janelle's lips press into a thin line, clamping down on her own emotional response, while Robyn's hands remain knotted in her lap, her eyes darting nervously. Meri now presents the last set of DNA evidence lab results that are as clear as daylight, confirming what had been suspected in the dark. The judge looks at them closely, his face very serious. These results are final, he says. The court will consider them along with all the other testimonies to reach a verdict. The room reacts en masse to this weight of truth across all present. Kody's hands shake underneath the table, his face is white. Christine leans back in her chair slightly, curling her lips into a slight smile. Janelle exhales a slow breath, letting the weight of it all soak in. While Robyn twitches her fingers anxiously and clenches her jaw, Meri describes what she heard. Snatches of a conversation, small admissions on Kody's part that, if fitted together, form a pattern of cunning deceptions and betrayals. They weren't mistakes, they weren't misunderstandings, Meri says, her voice firm, her eyes shining wet without spilling over. They were conscious choices. They were lies to mislead and deceive. The courtroom is silent, all ears for her. Kody squirms visibly in his seat. Christine's eyes glint triumphantly but quietly. Janelle remains composed but tensed. Robyn presses her lips together tightly, fighting composure. The judge calls for a brief recess, allowing the room to absorb the emotional weight of the testimony. Spectators whisper among themselves, shocked and riveted. Kody retreats to a corner, his mind racing, sweat glistening on his forehead. Christine and Janelle exchange subtle nods, knowing the turning point of the proceedings is at hand. Robyn stays tense, her fingers twisting nervously, while Meri stands tall, heart pounding, knowing full well the final phase of this courtroom drama is fast approaching. When the session resumes, Meri calls her final witness for the day, a reserved family member, someone whose perspective brought with it an emotional intensity akin to a flood. Their voice shakes as they recall personal moments of pain, betrayal, and heartbreak. Every word drops like thunder. Kody's face is white, his composure blown. Christine leans forward in her seat slightly, eyes aglow with satisfaction. Janelle clutches her hands in a death grip, bracing for the emotional impact, while Robyn fidgets. Visibly shaken, the judge listens intently, his eyes scanning the room as the witness speaks. Your testimony is noted, he says, voice firm. It will be weighed alongside the evidence already presented. The tension in the room is palpable, the emotional stakes higher than ever. Kody sinks slightly in his seat, gripping the edge of the table, unable to anticipate what will come next. Christine and Janelle exchange quiet glances, silently acknowledging that the climax is near, while Robyn's eyes remain wide, face pale, nerves frayed. She closes the session with the famous last words from Meri, her voice steady, yet laced with the weight of years of pent-up emotion. The truth has been hidden for far too long, she says, eyes sweeping the room. It is now time for accountability, clarity, and honesty to prevail. Choices made now will affect the future of this family forever. The room is in dead silence as a result of the impact her words have created. Kody exhales shakily, he turns pale, his sweat beading along his hairline. Christine leans back, her eyes glint with satisfaction. Janelle just sits in silence, Her thoughts trying to soak up the impact of what just happened. Robyn keeps her hands tightly clasped together, knuckles white, her eyes darting in wild nervousness between Meri, Kody, and the judge as the courtroom sits in held anticipation for the next big bombshell. The judge adjourns the court for one last recess before calling the final testimonies, which means this case is reaching its emotional climax. Kody mutters under his breath, This isn't over, they have no idea what's coming next. Christine's eyes shine with anticipation. Janelle is still calm but tense. While Robyn tugs nervously at her hands, Meri straightens her shoulders, undeterred, knowing that the next session might bring the truth into full light.